Very truly I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in some other way, is a thief and a robber. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Jesus used this figure of speech, but the Pharisees did not understand what he was telling them. Therefore, Jesus said again, very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd.
Today is sometimes called Good Shepherd Day. We celebrate Jesus as the Good Shepherd, and we explore what that exactly means for the people who, in his time, heard that message, and for us today. What images come to your mind when you hear that passage? Do you have any pictures in your head, like the one I'm about to show you? Watch this. Is this how you think of the Good Shepherd? This picture, like that? Perhaps some of you have something similar hanging in your home. That's fine. What about this one? This one's actually my favorite because look at Jesus. He's just like daydreaming. What? 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 Oh my goodness. Hold on, I got you guys. I got you. Projector cast. Stop. Here we go. Ready? Yes. Okay, that's the first one. Look at that. He's petting the little sheep, little puppy sheep. And then this one, he's like daydreaming, right? So he's like wistfully looking away. The sheep, he doesn't even look at the sheep. Just And look at his face. Well, no, that's a pretty good shot. It's like flawless. He's got a glow. Is that how you picture Jesus, the Good Shepherd? Because this is not what shepherds look like. You know that, right? This is what shepherds look like. This guy. This is a good shepherd. Look at his face. Wrinkly, worn out, sun-beaten. I don't know about the Nike beanie. I don't think Jesus had a Nike beanie. But the clothes are just like dusty, saggy from like sweat mixed with dust. And I love this picture. There's so many. I just Googled Middle Eastern shepherd, right? And so many pictures. But this one was one of my favorites because look in the background. There's like tanks, you know? And it was the same in Jesus' time as well. This is the better image of Jesus, I think. Kind of like he knows what's up, right in the shadow of an empire. A good shepherd. Shepherding is a metaphor used all throughout the Bible. We know that. You just heard that psalm. It's one of the most famous psalms of all time, Psalm 23. The good shepherd, the Lord is my shepherd. if you go through the Old Testament, that's used over and over and over again. And it makes sense, because from the very inception of the Hebrew people, they were nomadic. They were shepherding. Livestock was their livelihood, right? Father Abraham had so many flocks that he had to separate from his nephew Lot. Jacob was such a cunning breeder of sheep that he ended up putting his father-in-law out of business and grew his wealth to a massive status. The Hebrew people were shepherding people. Even the founding story of Cain and Abel, right, sides with Abel, the shepherd, over and against Cain, the farmer, which, as we've talked about before, stands in direct contradiction to every other story in the ancient Near East that praised grain and those who tend it. So the imagery of sheep made sense. It was recognizable. And Israel saw themselves as sheep on top of that too, right? Because people without a place, always wandering, always having to be led to pastures, led to find places to eat. And they saw themselves as exposed to the world as a sheep is, you know? The big empires of the world with the big teeth and the claws and the fangs, and they were little old Israel with their little fluffy wool, afraid of the big bad wolves. And so these became very, very meaningful and deeply powerful images for the Hebrew people. Nothing changed when we got to Jesus' time. It was still a metaphor that was in play, and it was still something to be super recognizable because there were sheep and shepherds everywhere in that region. And so Jesus takes this metaphor and he applies it to himself, and we have a lot to learn from it. But, as we'll see, it goes pretty in depth, and there's some real detail that we can pull out of Jesus' use of this metaphor. And it's important for us because as we have some time between us and Jesus, we might often kind of forget all that it means to be a good shepherd, and we might just kind of get the warm fuzzies from it, you know? And the warm fuzzies are fine, right? If you have the warm fuzzies when you think about Jesus and you picture yourself as a fluffy little lamb, he's like petting you, okay. But there's so much more than that. And there's so much more that this passage speaks to us. And as we'll see at the end, I'm not going to spoil it, it's actually more important than even how we think about Jesus. It has an importance for our lives as well. So, let's begin with the overall themes of this passage so it's clear in our heads. Remember, you just heard it read, but Jesus starts this discussion by telling the Pharisees that anyone who doesn't enter in through the sheep gate, right, the gate of the sheep pen, is a robber and a thief. So let's unpack some of this. What is Jesus doing here? Why is he using this metaphor? What is the pen? What is this gate? First, the sheep pen refers to Israel, right? The sheep are the people of Israel, and the pen is where they stay, so the nation of Israel. And Jesus' main concern, and it's the concern of the Pharisees, right, is the good of Israel. That's why they're having this discussion. They both agree they want the best thing for the pen and the sheep that are in the pen. Jesus' concern is exactly the concern of Psalm 23, that Yahweh's people have what they need, find green pasture. There's definitely Psalm 23 in mind in this passage. So the people of Israel are the sheep, and God leads them. But there are people who are trying to get into the fold, right? Robbers, thieves. They're trying to guide the sheep, but do it in illegitimate ways. And they're not going in by the gate, but they're sneaking in over the wall or something like that. And Jesus says, look, these people aren't doing this for the good of the sheep. They're doing this for their own gain, right? A thief or a robber, what's the point of robbing? What's the point of stealing? Well, to take and then sell it and make the money, whatever. They don't care about the sheep's livelihood. They don't care about the sheep's life. They just want to jump in, grab some sheep, sell them off, make some money. They're shortcutting, they're taking someone else's work, and they're gaining from it. Jesus is probably here referring to those who rule the nation religiously, right? So particularly the Sadducees. He's telling the Pharisees, hey, these people are robbers and thieves. Maybe he's trying to implicate them as well. Maybe he's warning them to stay away from the Sadducees. Whatever it is, he's thinking of the Sadducees, he's thinking of the Herodians, right? This line of kings that ruled Israel and cared nothing about the people, but just wanted to build greater palaces, bigger cities for their glory, and to get closer and closer to Rome. They got in bed with Rome to the extent that the average person, the sheep, was utterly disenfranchised with very little shot of actually living a good, rewarding, green pasture kind of life. They're not shepherds, Jesus tells the Pharisees. They're just robbers and thieves. But then he takes the idea of a gate, And he explains to them, like, this is how it works, right? There's a gate, and the shepherd goes in and out of the gate, and the sheep are okay. But then he kind of connects it to himself, and he says, I am the gate to the sheepfold. This isn't some random metaphor that Jesus is just saying, like, hey, if anyone wants to get to the sheep, they got to get through me or in and out or something like that. Like, I'm the only way into the sheep pen. It's not really that as much as something that's extremely recognizable. Very often, a sheep pen would have no gate. You've probably heard this if you've been in churches. And the shepherd would lay across the gate so that at nighttime, if a sheep leaves, then he's kind of forced to go over the shepherd to do it, and the shepherd knows and can keep them safe. The importance of that metaphor is this. Jesus is saying, look, I'm not just here to hang out for a little bit, right? I'm not just hopping over the wall, making sure the sheep are okay, and then I'm going back to my fancy mansion in downtown Jerusalem. I live with the sheep. I sleep with the sheep. I eat, breathe, sleep, sheep. I'm with the sheep all the time. To say I'm the gate implies he has no other livelihood than caring for the sheep. That's his only purpose. He even stays with them at night. He knows, and he's connected to the people at every level. This is, of course, one of the primary things that we know about Jesus' ministry. He spent all his time with common people who had become beaten down and disenfranchised. It's even weird to say he spent all his time as if he was like, oh, I'm going to be this kind of person. It wasn't that he just like kind of decided and, had like a savior complex or something. He was that kind of person. He was brought up in that area, decided to never leave, to embrace it, and to give the people around him the greatest chance for the greatest life. This is why he talks about the sheep hearing his voice. The people hear my voice, he says. They know it. They follow it. I've earned the right to speak. This is another common shepherding metaphor. Like there's this, in the Middle East, it's still in use today. And I think Scotland has something like this too, where there's like a language that the shepherds will sing out to the sheep. And it's really odd. You can look it up on YouTube. It sounds really weird and creepy. It's almost like sheep sounds, like sheep and goat sounds, but kind of mixed with like a song. And the shepherd teaches it to the flock so that when they hear it, they know it's him and they'll come and follow after him. But it means that there's time spent. It means that he put in all the hours to be trusted by the people. Jesus is saying, everyone who came before me was a thief and a robber. Other messiahs, zealots, Essenes, Pharisees, Sadducees, they're all singing the wrong song. Nobody's really with the sheep. Nobody actually cares for the sheep. He goes after most of these groups too. Remember the Pharisees that he says like they don't really care about the people. They just want to be seen as people doing the right thing, so they pray in the streets, The Sadducees, of course, just all about the money, getting in bed with Rome. Essenes withdrew themselves into the wilderness, thinking that if they could purify themselves completely from evil, God would step in and help. And the Zealots, of course, violent group that wanted to overthrow Rome and would even kill parts of their own family if they knew that it would incite a rebellion. So again, the people have no actual value. So we see that Jesus is setting himself apart from all these different people who he says are just robbers and thieves out for their own gain. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be rescued. They will come in and out. They'll find pasture. The thief only comes to kill and destroy, but I have come to give life and to give it fully. This passage helps us to understand why it's important that Jesus is the gate. It's not just that he guards the door and decides who gets to come in and out, because sometimes that's how this passage is taken. Rather, it's that he makes sure the sheep have free passage. Like it says, they will come in and go out and find pasture. He wants to be the gate so he can be sure they have all the access to the things they need to live a good life. Still waters, refreshment, green pastures, plenty to eat, safety from enemies. That's a simple idea, isn't it? I want people to have what they need so that they can live their life fully without access being blocked by bad shepherds exploiting them. But it's difficult to do sometimes. Look at Jesus' life. His miracles show us that this is exactly what he was all about. The miracles aren't just random acts, like just fancy magic tricks to get people's attention or something like that. They all demonstrate the same point and show us how it is that Jesus shepherds people. Think about these. Demon possession, bringing people back into community that had been kicked out. Physical healing, giving people opportunity to work again who had been stuck begging. The feeding miracles, giving people food, bread and fish that had once been theirs but had been too heavily taxed by Rome to give them a livelihood. Healing unclean diseases, giving people entrance back into the temple and thus society who had been expelled. Jesus empowered people everywhere he went. The shepherd empowers the sheep. He worked to give them abundant lives and greater access. That's what it means for him to be the gate. Now we hear this, that the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. And Jesus starts talking about a wolf here. He's like, I'm ready to take on the wolf. The others, they run away when the wolf comes, and then the sheep get scattered. But I'll be killed by a wolf if I have to. I'll lay down my life, even in the face of wolves. What's happening here? What's going on? Is it just some kind of general... I was like trying to do a little test case. I was like, hey, Britt, what did you hear growing up that like the wolves were here? She's like, I don't know, like the devil or something. Like the devil comes to attack the people of God. And I was like, okay, yeah, I've kind of heard that. Evil in general, right? Just kind of vague. Just anything that is out to destroy the sheep. But I think it's very specific here. And there's two hints that tell us what exactly this specific thing Jesus is referencing with wolves. The first is that it says the sheep will be scattered, right? The wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The book of John, as we've talked about, was written pretty late in the game, after the destruction of the temple, around the year 85. And so we already know who scattered the sheep. It was Rome. Secondly, the idea of a wolf stood for Rome. Like everybody would have recognized that. It was a metaphor that was extremely common and a story very important to the Roman Empire. This is Romulus and Remus, and they are nursing at the teats of a wolf. There's no other way to say that, I guess. A wolf is giving them sustenance. And this image is one of countless images like similar to this. It was one of the founding myths of the Roman Empire, that Romulus and Remus, the two brothers who started the city of Rome, were raised by a she-wolf and thus given wolfly powers, right? Like speed and strength and aggression and killer instinct. All the things you need to form a successful empire. Even Constantine, right? The Christian emperor or whatever, had on the back of his coins Romulus and Remus being fed by the she-wolf. So it was a very, very, very important story for the Roman people. Jesus is referencing Rome here and saying, like, look, they're a beastly animal. They're going to attack. They care nothing for sheep. In fact, they just want to tear them up, eat them, tear them to shreds. And he makes the point, when the wolf comes, I'm not afraid. I'm not going to back down. And that's, of course, what happened. So to sum up real quick, before we get into some new stuff, sheep are people, right? Sheep are the people of Israel. The sheep pen is the nation with all its systems. Being a good shepherd means that Jesus wants the sheep to move freely through life, to come in and out of the gate so that they have what they need to make their lives abundant and well-lived. And he stands opposed, even to the point of dying, to those who seek to hurt the sheep. Now, why does that matter for us, right? Why does it matter that we understand exactly what Jesus is talking about and who the wolf is and all of that? Why would large sections of Christianity recognize today as a special day? And why would we connect it to Easter? It's because if we can understand who Jesus was and what he did, if we can understand why he would call himself a shepherd and how exactly it was that he shepherded the people, then it helps us understand another text, a text that does speak about post-resurrected Christ. Remember, there's a story later in the book of John. Same book, so definitely connected. When Peter and some of the other disciples go fishing, and Jesus comes to them, but they don't recognize him, and they're not having any luck catching fish, and so Jesus says, try on the other side of the boat, and then suddenly, tons of fish. So Peter just knows it's Jesus, jumps in the water, swims to him, and they have this conversation. And Jesus tells Peter, do you love me? Peter's like, yes, I love you. And he says, then feed my sheep. Asks him again, do you love me, Peter? Yes, I love you. Then take care of my sheep. Do you love me, Peter? And Peter says, Jesus, I told you 2 times already that I love you. And he says, then feed my sheep. Right? 3 times, same response. Feed the sheep. That was the call to Peter. Jesus tells Peter, you're the shepherd now. I'm not going to be here to shepherd anymore. This is your thing. And that, by the way, is a call to all of us. In case you might think, well, that was Jesus talking to Peter. That doesn't mean that it's for us. Peter himself tells us in his other letters that we are to be a nation of priests. In other words, a group that ministers to the needs of people around us. A group that takes care of each other. Paul's also very clear on this. We lead each other. We guide each other. We shepherd each other. It is on us to be shepherds. And that's why this passage is so important, because we see what a shepherd looks like and what it means to be that kind of shepherd. Jesus gives us an example to follow. There's another line we haven't looked at yet from the reading that you heard. Jesus says, I have other sheep that aren't part of this pen, but they will be one flock and one shepherd. It's a really important text. Jesus is saying, hey, these people, the ones I lived with my whole life, the ones I've healed and given food to and stood with in the midst of oppression, there's people like that all over the place. Common people being attacked by wolves, people who need guidance and life-giving words. They're everywhere. They're everywhere. I care for them. I want to see them flourish. I want to see them have life. And they don't live in Israel. And that's kind of obvious to us, right? For a couple reasons. We're from this tradition and we're not Israelites, so we've kind of accepted that it got broader. We're very globalized in our world. Of course we want everyone to have a good life and not just us or whatever. But there's 2 things here. First, this would be much harder to hear for the original context, of course, or at least something they need to be reminded of time to time. But the second part of this is something we still do struggle with and do need to be reminded of. Notice that Jesus says, there's sheep from different pens, but they will all be one flock. That's a really good translation. Some translations keep the same word. Some sheep are in different folds, but they will all be one fold. Or sheep are in different pens, but they will all be one pen. But that's not correct. What the NIV and most translations do here is really good. It's 2 different words Jesus uses. They're not the same word. He says, I have sheep in a different pen, but they'll all be one flock. They're all sheep, they all need care, they all need defense from wolves, but they aren't all the same. And the goal should never be to make them all the same. For Jesus to say that there are other sheep that aren't from Israel is a big, big deal. Right? It's not just the geography of it. Nation is religion. Israel is where God is, and he gives us blessings. So to say that there are sheep, people who need care, people who need life, people who need guidance, outside of that pen could mean all sorts of crazy things. But they are all under the care of the shepherd, regardless of how they worship, or where they live, or what they look like. And that's something we need to be reminded of, I think, and encouraged towards. People don't have to be like you for you to be a guide in their life. People don't have to become how you are now for you to seek their greatest good. Even if it means they end up staying drastically different than you are. That's okay. There are sheep, not from this pen. The second thing we learn from Jesus about being a good shepherd is that being a shepherd means standing with those that the wolves are attacking. Think about this. Rome didn't think of itself as a big beastly animal out to destroy people, right? Like, Rome told itself that it was bringing peace to the world, the Pax Romana. And Rome did some awesome stuff, too, didn't it? I mean, all those roads that connected all the world together, have trade, we had the exchange of ideas, beautiful architecture. But then this Messiah from Nazareth and his little band of followers, especially that one from Tarsus, wrote all these letters, and they can't seem to get on board with the thing. They only seem to want to be negative about everything. Can't you imagine someone coming to Jesus and saying, come on, Jesus, wolves, I mean, you're being a little melodramatic here. We didn't used to have silk, right? We didn't used to have Caesar salads or whatever it is that Rome brought. I don't even know all the benefits to the Palestinian area for Rome. But point is, I'm sure that like the overall wealth of the area increased, right? But Jesus says, yeah, but that person's still hurting. Yeah, but that group, they're still pretty beat down in life. It's not trying to complain. It's not trying to be a troublemaker. It's not trying to be negative. But being a shepherd, which is what we're all called to do, demands of us that we point out if sheep are being mistreated. Every single one is important. Every human life has value. Every sheep matters. Everybody is valuable. And so even though we can step back and recognize the good of the systems we see around us, at the end of the day, we have to say, but there are still people who need guidance and need greater access and need deeper lives and need more fulfilling ways to be. And they're being hindered from doing so. So today the call is to look at the Good Shepherd, to follow his lead, to embrace our call to be shepherds, first to each other, right? Guide each other, lead each other, encourage each other to live full and abundant lives. Last week after church, a lot of us went to lunch. And Rachel and I ended up saying like 5 different times to each other, you should do this, you should do this, you should do that. Like I would be talking about something and something would hit me like, oh, you know what you should do, Rachel? You need to blah, 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 blah. Even like career paths and stuff. Like you should do this, you should do this. And then like 10 minutes later she'd be like, oh, you know what you need to do? Blah, 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 like all this stuff. And it hit me towards the end of the like lunch was like, we're just telling each other what to do the whole afternoon. But that's shepherding, right? If you see a strength in somebody, highlight it. Point it out. Magnify it in them. Get them to live and walk within it. What happens when we do that? If that's how we shepherd each other and guide each other, we'll form these communities that are so strong and vibrant, full of life, that we can shepherd the sheep that aren't in the fold. We can have the strength and courage, which always flow from love, to stand against wolves when they try to scatter sheep. So embrace your call to shepherding today. Guide each other, love each other, encourage as the Good Shepherd did for us. Let's pray. God, we feel that you're guiding us, pulling us towards something new, bringing us into a new way of being. And we embrace and admit and are willing to live in the reality that we are the ones who enact that guidance to each other. Help us to listen when people have things to tell us. Help us to be brave when we have something to tell somebody else. Give us resolve and courage in the face of wolves. Give us a love for every single sheep. Help us to see that not all sheep will be a part of our pen. Keep us open and loving and courageous. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. We're going to partake in communion now. That quintessential symbol of a people who come together from all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of beliefs, all kinds of religious backgrounds. As we look at 1 Corinthians, one of the main passages that this act is talked about, Paul is telling us that you can all come to the same table, right? Whether you are a pagan Corinthian person or a Jewish Corinthian person, whether you were rich or poor or male or female, it doesn't matter. None of that matters. We all guide each other in that. In fact, Paul points out several times in that book and others, those things are all gifts for you. Some of you are encouraging. Some of you are pastors. Some of you, he points out all the things they're doing, and he says, these are your gifts to each other, your spiritual gifts to one another. And so this is a time to dwell on that, to think about it, to celebrate it. As we take the bread and we take the wine, the juice, think about how you are going to shepherd somebody. Is there someone in your life that's been telling you something and you haven't wanted to listen to them? Maybe that's your chance to be a good sheep. Is there someone in your life that you've felt compelled to talk to encourage, to reach out to, because you see something in them that you want to spark a flame? Think about that. Call that person this week. So dwell on those things as we take these together. We'll pass out the bread, we'll pass out the juice, we'll sing a song, we'll eat together, and we'll be dismissed.